You are my linen garment I put on. Lord, you are my linen garment I put on, while I minister to in the inner courts. They shall not gird themselves with anything that causes sweat. They shall not gird themselves with anything that causes sweat. Lord, you are my linen garment I put on. Lord, you are my linen garment I put on, while I minister to you in the inner courts. Oh, your garments smell of earth and aloe, of acacia. Oh, your garments smell of myrrh and aloe, of acacia, as I minister to you in the inner.
Well, hello. I just gotta tell y'all, I pretty much just had one of the most incredible, exuberant, dedicated, glorious days of my life. And you know why? Because I worked so hard. I've been working relentlessly, like 6 days a week, laboring diligently with my hands. Like I took pictures at the start of this journey for the past, 5 weeks, as I've begun to work diligently on a farm again. And I am so thankful because my hands get soft on road life. If I spend too long just continuously driving everywhere, I get soft. There's no way around it. I drive a house down the road. There's a lot of physical activity at times required when you're hauling 50 amp power cords around and you have to jack your jacks up with your hands because they're not working so well. Like my power leveling jacks, which are without question one of my favorite things that I have on my house, are biting the dust ferociously. The problem is they're not biting the dust. They're just not sucking back in. And I've tried changing hydraulic fluid and I've tried a lot of troubleshooting, but to no avail. It sounds like a jackhammer is dispensing itself out of the bottom of my RV every time I try to level my house now, which is not the sound it's supposed to make. It's supposed to be like, and my entire house can lift into the sky. I can't really do that anymore. So I've been using my fists and my feet and my hands in all kinds of super dangerous ways. But you get soft on the road life if you're not stopping and working like a dog I don't even know if dogs even know how to work anymore. Most dogs don't work. I'm working around working dogs because I'm a shepherd again, y'all. Yes. Yes. And finally, not of goats. Okay, full disclosure. If you have goats, congratulations on your nightmares. I love goats. Not really. I don't. You know why? Because goats don't know how to stay in a fence. Do you know how much disdain I have for goats? I had one chance to talk to the young teenager crowd at a conference called Take on the World back in August. And I left them with some seriously important life lessons. Now, first of all, when I got there, I thought it's a teenager conference. It was the portion that was supposed to be reserved, Kodesh, set apart for the teenagers. And instead, when I got it, and so I had geared up in my mind, you are now a young man and you are a young woman, and we're going to have a conversation about that now. I geared up for that, right, in my head, about the life lessons I wish somebody had told me when I was 13 going on 55 in my head and battling legitimate nightmares at night and human beings, flesh and blood in front of my face. I needed somebody that was going to throw the fire on my excited, exuberant desire to see life transformation take place in myself and the people around me. Well, when I got in the room, there was a bunch of 9-year-olds and like 8-year-olds and 6-year-olds and like 2-year-olds even. There was all the ages. And so I had geared up for some like legitimate PG-13 level like scripture reading, because I never teach or talk about stuff that's not explicitly already mentioned in the scriptures. Parents and stuff will come up to me and they'll ask me this question, especially the ones that maybe have read my book or they know about maybe some of my, like, if you dig into the old channels history of mine, you'll find all kinds of videos. Back then when most people used to call me and be like, we want to interview you, have you on our show. Come tell us your brutal, savage, gut-wrenchingly disgusting testimony. And I was like, you betcha. I don't really do that anymore. I actually turn down a lot of people's like inquiries to interview me now, because a lot of them just want to ask me like about the darkness that I came from, and not as much about like the exuberant light that I'm pursuing with everything in me kind of time frame now. It's just changed. And so because I'm changing, I told Chelsea that, I don't know, maybe a couple months ago, I finally had this realization that I did not want to know. Like, for instance, hold on a second. Oh gosh, the title's right behind me. My book, right? Snatched from the flames. One man's journey to uncover the family secrets buried in his blood-stained past. That's what I was doing when I wrote this 4 years ago now, going on 4 years ago. I was trying to find out answers to these mysteries that had been lying as unchecked boxes somewhere in my head for so long. And then when I got to a certain point in there, I realized I don't really need to know more. Like, I don't need to know more. Like, I know from family members now who have also come out in their own version, validating the things that I went through, that they themselves went through. I understood that there's a certain level of, I don't need to know more than I know already. I simply have an insatiable need to know all about this. Like, this book, I know some about it. Granted, I don't know as much about this. And I want to know how to do this. The ultimate guide to home butchering. Like, I want to know how to eat food. Not the kind of food that you go to the store and buy. That's not food. No, really, guys. It's really not food. Like, let me just explain something to you. When you start to understand how food can be, this is Restoration Agriculture by Mark Shepard. This book is so incredibly beneficial. I am trying to just smack you in the face with excitement and desire to know that there's a way of doing farming and food cultivation for your food, your fiber, your medicines, your oils, your fats, your fruits, your vegetables, like all of it, your meats, your milks, all of it. And it doesn't have to look anything like what we have seen as farming modeled our whole life. It can be beautiful, like so exquisite. Human beings will fail to have a comprehension of just describing it. Like the giant G, capital, glorious garden of life, marvelous experience. Here's why I'm obsessed with wanting to know everything about soil, plants, animals, food, nutrition. Like, I had these things as a first love when I was young. Then this whole thing got into my life, right? Covenants of death, the whole nightmare stuff. That got its claws on me, you know, the dragon. And it took from me these pieces of my identity, and it sequestered them in places of my soul that I locked up so that someday, maybe if ever I experience life, like real life, I might once again dig those broken, bitter, wounded pieces of my soul out of the crevasses they were buried in and try to resuscitate them with something of meaning, like of substance. I needed some serious meat to satisfy the hunger that was in my soul for being deprived of 25 years of freedom and of understanding and of knowledge and of truth. And when I finally got a hold of that, and really over the last 3 years is when that took place, I have been so insatiably hungry because I recognized that I was going to spend the rest of my life going and working in a job to get imaginary magic money so that I could spend it at a store to buy food that was grown by somebody else that was good, highly nutritious, delicious, and satisfying for my hunger, right? I got so tired of the fact that I needed to work more jobs than I am even comfortable describing to you in order to sustain the needs that I had for just myself and my wife at the time and Naomi. Then we started being fruitful and multiplying. And I'm like, there's no way I can afford $5,000 a month for food. Like, I don't eat poison. I really diligently try to guard my family from eating poison, which means my wife and I have eaten a lot of very simple meals for years, like literal beans and rice meals, many beans and rice meals, and a whole lot of buckwheat. Once we discovered buckwheat, I was like, game on, son. No more oatmeal. No more oatmeal. If you don't know about buckwheat, change your life. Get buckwheat and amaranth. Like raw grains. This is why I'm a fanatical Millenite. Like, eat living bread because you can get it for super cheap. Like, I don't like spending money on food. That's the root of it my whole life. When I have to spend the money that I earn in any capacity on food that I put in my face, I starve myself. Like, I starve myself. I know that sounds kind of crazy. The whole last chapter in this book is called The Hunger, about how I basically starve myself and eat other free food. If there's free food around, that's all I eat. I don't want to have to work. I don't want to have to make money to pay for food. I am more than satisfied at working for food. I just don't like paying money for food. I really don't. And when I have to pay for it, I squirrel it away and I don't eat it. To where I eat the leftovers of other people because I don't want any of it to go to waste. Like, I can't not do that. It's so hard for me. If there's like a dog bowl or the leftovers pile, like biblically, let's just be clear. Dog food doesn't come in bags that you buy at the store. That stuff that's marketed to you as dog food. Question. Biblically, what do dogs eat? Like, I'm all about doing biblical things in biblical ways because I believe it's the source of truth. Do you know what dogs eat? The scraps that fall from the master's table. Find that reference for me. Dig into it and consider it. Your dog should eat your scraps that come off of your table. And you know who's got a major self-interest in keeping you from feeding your dog table scraps? The people who profit off your dog being sick and you buying their food. Like veterinarians. Yes. And pet stores. Yes. And all the people that just gobble up your money. We'll sell you pet insurance today because veterinary care is so expensive. Meanwhile, we'll sell you dead dogs and dead cats in your dog food so that they'll get cancer and prion diseases and their brains will eat themselves apart as we make money off of their sickness. Dogs used to not be sick like this, y'all. I've been to a lot of countries all over the world, and you know what I didn't see? Cancer-ridden dogs like we see today, or cats. That's because we feed them dead animals. There's a book out there called Dead Pets Don't Lie. I'll put a picture in it now. Dead Pets Don't Lie. It's like a documentary-ish thing. Skywatch TV and Thomas Horn, that group put that out. It shows you basically that after a dog, you take your sick, dying, dead, diseased, Rufus, and you go to the vet and you're like, I'm so sorry, Rufus. You got so much cancer in your body. We're going to have to put you down. And it's horrible. And so they take you back into the back room, right? And they're like, we're going to give him a shot. And it's going to make him go to sleep. And then we're going to give him another shot that's going to stop his heart and he'll die in your arms. And you're like, okay. And then what do they do with Rufus? You know what they do with Rufus? They sell Rufus's body because it's worth money to people that will render it into meat. It's called a meat rendering facility. They buy Rufus's dead, carcinogenic, riddled, diseased body with all the drugs in it that kill dogs and cats. And then they grind it up into pieces of stuff and they sell it to a meat rendering facility that sends it to a animal feed facility that then sells it to you for $100 a bag. That's where dog food comes from, that's in a bag or in a can and that kind of stuff. I understand some of you guys are like legitimately dedicated to feeding your animals exquisite food. I did too, but remember I need like $5,000 or $10,000 a month to feed my dogs raw meat bones. Like beef, marrow, bones, and knuckles and stuff like that. But then I realized I would have to feed them organic cow bones. Why don't I just have cows in my life? How do I raise cows and sheep and horses and oxen and like livestock? I want flocks of these animals in my life because I don't want to pay for this stuff. Does that make sense? I want to have an animal that reproduces. Bank accounts shouldn't be measured by ones and zeros. They should be measured by male and females. Like, you've got a livestock herd out in the pasture. You generally have this amazing thing out there that happens sometimes once a year, sometimes twice, where they give birth. And that's exquisite. Like chickens, they multiply like crazy. Turkeys, even better. I love turkeys so much. My wife and I are obnoxiously in love with turkeys. We have this Narragansett turkeys. The best things I've ever known. I would take them over 10 dogs every day of the week.
You know, just take a little stroll with my babies and my turkeys. Oh my gosh.
They keep near us. They cuddle us. We cuddle them. My children have them as like lap pets. And they go out and they eat pests. They eat ticks. Just let me say that again. I have an animal that eats ticks. And it eats grasshoppers. And it eats worms. And it's amazing. And it's snuggly. And it's beautiful. And it can fly up into the trees and roost at night. Now, granted, they're super delicate and weak their first like 8 or 10 weeks of their life. But then they get mighty and strong, and they grow long necks like a serpent, and they have feet like a dinosaur, and they have wings like a bird, and they're camouflaged like the sky mixed with background woodland noises. It's amazing. I love them so much. You should have turkeys, and you could keep them in your yard, no problems. And if your neighbors get curious, tell them to get one of their own. You could start a flock and start a small hustle on the side and sell them for $30 to $60 a chick. And then at, certain times of the year, you could eat them. They're delicious. I haven't eaten mine because I named them. That doesn't mean I won't eat them. I'll eat things I name. No problem. I don't mind killing things that I name. Not even a little bit. Like I've butchered animals. Hence why this book is now a part of my life. Because as much as I read this book and I watched so many videos on people butchering chickens, until you actually do it, none of the YouTube videos cut it. Like not even a little bit. I've watched Richard Perkins eviscerating chickens in under 27 seconds. That means he takes a chicken, cuts its neck, drains all the blood out of it. Then he cuts its head off, its feet off, throws it in this thing that takes all the feathers off of it, scalds it, plucks its feathers off in this thing that takes all the feathers off. And then from there, with that like nakedish looking chicken, he guts it completely in less than 27 seconds. And I was like, man, I've watched this guy do this probably 50 times. I got this thing no problem. 23 minutes. That's how long it took me to butcher my first chicken. 23 minutes, because I couldn't even get the chicken down in this thing called the kill cone, which is like a metal cone where it can slide down into it and its neck can hang out. And birds go really calm. Chickens, when you hang them upside down by their feet, like they literally go neutral, like a shark when you tip it on its head. If you can ever fondle a shark in a vertical position, meaning you hold its head like this and you nuzzle it with your beard. I've never tried it, but I'm super excited to try it. You hold it in that position and its tail is sticking up vertically. It basically goes to sleep right in your hands. Don't ask the guy with no hands. I've got 10 fingers. I'm still here. But I met a guy one time who'd been bit by a shark. It was a nurse shark. And I told him not to tell people that part of the story. Because I told him, you've been bit by a shark. It's one of the best stories I've ever heard in my life. Tell me everything. And he was like, it bit my calf. And he had scars and stuff. I may be a nurse shark, but that thing didn't nurse his leg at all. Anyways, I realized at a serious point in my life, at a critical juncture in my life, I wanted animals that reproduced so bad. And so I started with goats. And I told these teenagers back at this conference, as I realized there was a bunch of wee lads in the room, I told them goat stories because it's what I had at the time because I'd been a shepherd. And I told them this thing about goats. 2 lessons. Here's your takeaways. Goats always get out of fences. I don't care what kind of fence you think you have. And you know who else backs me up on that? This guy, Mark Shepard, who's all about a way of farming that's just exquisite. And here's what he has to say about goats. Basically this. This is how you know goats are needed in a landscape. The land is literally trying to vomit you out of it. And so it sends up things that only goats can eat. If your land can only support goats on it, it's because it's gotten so nutritionally degraded for the minerals and like the under the soil life is so bad that nature itself is growing stuff that makes your life miserable. So you'll leave it alone so it can simmer down. Like when Yahuwah said to his people, I am sending you to a land of milk and honey. Do you know what that meant? Milking cows require the most pristine, nutrient-dense grass. Like them and their calves are the number one neediest of like the livestock world. They need the most nutrient-dense grassland and pasture in order to produce the highest quality life, meat and milk, right? pollinator side, on the insect side of things, you need a very healthy, from trees, flowering and fruiting trees, all the way down to, your understory stuff, your shrubs, your vines, your tiny little grasses and their flowers. If all that stuff is in a healthy, like symbiotic relationship, bees and pollinators, not just bees, but like pollinating insects, like moths and butterflies and flies, they will be in such abundance because there's so much food going around for all of them that milk and honey are like the definition of a dream land in harmony. Like land is actually functioning in its system. When your pastures, like if you just open up and start clearing forests down, right? Because you want more space to have your cows. When you start cutting down forests and you start taking down the big canopies of trees and clearing brush away and vines away and stuff, you start killing off that massive undersoil life and you start eradicating the thing that is needed for that life to be sustained. And what'll happen is your nutrient content that's in your soils and in your grasses will degrade, okay? And you can do that for a while. But sooner or later, what's going to happen is it's not going to support much anymore, not the cows. So you'll move the cows on and you'll bring in the backups, right? Which is generally sheep. Sheep are like the in-between. Sheep can be supported on an in-between pasture, one that's like still got some good stuff in there, but it's not quite as glorious as it once was. It's like your grade B level pastures. It can handle it because sheep will eat like weedy stuff too. Because here's how cows function. Cows go in and they're like, grass, my favorite. I'm going to go eat all my favorite bites. So they take the top bite, right, off like a blade of grass. They eat the top bite off because it's the sweetest. Seriously, go eat grass tomorrow, unless it's been sprayed with Roundup. Then throw rocks at the guy who sprays Roundup on everything. Not really. Throw verbal rocks at him like I'm doing right now to your face. Throw verbal rocks at that dude's face and teach him about the poisons that he's spraying on your lawn. Eat grass tomorrow. And this time, eat the stuff that's old and hard and crunchy and miserable. And then go eat the stuff that's freshly growing and sprouting vibrant new green stuff. And you'll understand the difference. Cows are no different, y'all. They like the good stuff just like you. There's over 300 varieties of grass, I believe. And every one of them is edible to your face and your belly. Unless it's been sprayed with poisons. But this is why I love bamboo. Because bamboo is a grass. Something to consider. Anyways, cows go through, they eat the top bite off, right? They go along and they eat their favorite little bite, like the ice cream, off of all of the grasses that are their favorite, all the freshest, newest growth. And then if you don't move that cow, which you should, if you don't move that cow off of that pasture, it's going to go through the next day, and what's it going to do? You can't eat the top first bite, okay? So it's going to eat the second bite, okay? Now your grass is like, oh my gosh, somebody's eating us. This is miserable. Try to grow faster, grow faster. Well, grasses, they grow predominantly from some of the stuff that's happening down here beneath them, but their main way of growing is what's called photosynthesis. They're solar collectors. And when you start eating off all the solar collection area, surface area, you start mitigating its ability to regrow. And so now it has to use more of the nutrients that are down and in the soil and less of what's available literally out of the sky. And it slows the whole process down. So if you keep them on there for, say, the second day, now they come through on the third day and they eat that thing down, right? Or the fourth day and the fifth day. And all they're doing then every day is eating that little tiny nubule that's barely growing out of the ground. Sheep, on the other hand, at the same time that you have this grass that's down to this nub, you guys have probably seen this on overgrazed pastures, when then there's basically not much left for them, say you then, during that same time frame, have weeds that cows won't eat, growing, getting bigger, developing a larger canopy. They're growing stronger and they're collecting sun all the time because the cows aren't eating them. And they're getting stronger and stiffer and woodier. And they're getting more resilient because they're cranking out the sunlight, baby, and they're rocking. Weeds are just growing like crazy. Grass is getting smaller. Nutrient load for the grasses is increasing. Nutrient use over here on the weeds is increasing. They're growing a canopy like a small tree at this point, and you're losing the war. So people bring in sheep if you can. They bring in sheep, right? And sheep will eat some of those weeds, not all of them, but they'll eat a lot of those weeds. But they also don't want to eat the ones that have turned into trees, right? That's where you can still utilize your pastures. But then if you leave the sheep on there and you overgraze the sheep, or you keep the cows and the sheep, you eventually degrade the pasture so much so that vines and nightmare weeds are the only thing that's growing. That's when you bring in the goats, because goats eat nightmares like poison ivy. Sheep will eat it too. But goats eat it like nothing else. Goats can be surviving on the worst pastures on the earth. This is why when I was in Afghanistan, I was in Kabul, Afghanistan, in the city, and I saw shepherd boys for the first time in my life. And I saw hundreds of goats. I never saw sheep. I only saw goats and a couple of cows. They only had goats driving them through a city, like active multiple lanes of traffic, goats, shepherd boys, crushing life and making me feel like a wee little sissy. Awesome humans driving goats to what? Barren wastelands for about 20, 30, 40 miles in all directions. Then we went up to one area that was beautiful in a lake above Kabul that was gorgeous and elegant and full of water and full of pasture-ish areas. But those boys were driving the goats because the goats were basically the only thing that could be supported on the pastures, quote unquote, that were available in that town, in the city. It was something to see. I lived on farms where they had goats that were surviving on a pasture that was continually under this kind of same pressure. And some of you guys are limited based off of acreage as to what you're able to do. But if you're able to graze your animals in an area and then move them, like say how predators do in the wild, you see all the buffalo grazing in an area, and then all of a sudden the lions show up, and they're all like, "Run for your lives!" And they're just trampling everything, and they're gone. And they give the grass time to rest and recover, and they absorb and use all that poop and pee and nutrients that are in there and sunlight to regrow. And all that trampled down grasses creates like a carbon mat that holds all the moisture and the bugs and everything in there. And they're like, yes, thriving oak savannas. That's what we want to recreate basically on our farms. And that's what I'm like unbelievably excited to finally get a chance to start doing more of. So I got to finally butcher sheep. I got to finally butcher sheep because a sheep died in my arms, legitimately. I caught a sheep with a shepherd's crook, which is so lamed. If you don't know about lamed, look up Paleo Hebrew, Eriktology. I'll attach the link below so you can learn about lamed. That's a Hebrew letter. And it's like the staff of authority. It's this little guy. Where are you, buddy? Right there. It's that dude. That dude right there. The authority, pointing to the Kaf, the Torah, the working hand of the Creator. Like this is the Aleph-Bet, legitimately. Anyways, I got to use the lamed, like the actual shepherd's crook, to catch a sheep. And it was one of the most invigorating things I've ever done. The first sheep I caught, though, with the lamed, with my shepherd's staff, died in my arms. In less than 40 seconds of holding him. It was bleeding out his face. It had what was called pigeon fever. It was terrible. Its entire chest swelled like a pigeon, and it bled out of its own eyes. It was like a nightmare waiting to happen. I just happened to be the one to collect it. But I used it as an opportunity to sharpen my butcher knives. Finally, I've got a good use for those. And learn how to do this. And I did it totally wrong in some ways, and totally awesome in others. And I broke out my kukri machete because I didn't have a bone saw, and I chopped things into pieces in one swing. And I felt like a man. And that's what today I'm here to talk to you all about. Because I was finally a real man today. I felt like a man's man, like in a totally different, like deep in my soul's glorious kind of manliness way.
Whoa.
I wanted to be this my whole life before I got scared of hard work. And that's what happens when you raise a society of softies. Like, we have one of the softest societies I have ever seen in my life. Truly. And it gets softer every day because you know what? Some of y'all are sitting right now as you're watching this. Most of you, granted, I bet are sitting while I'm watching this and talking about this. But if you are standing and working hard, stinking congratulations to you. Some of you guys may be farmers or maybe handling animals or livestock or sweating your faces into the earth. And if you are, I could not be more proud of you. You all need to work hard, but we are raised in a society that teaches you to sit, be safe, stay down, don't get up. I'll bring it to you. Why go to the store when I can just click a button and bring it right to you? Because by you going out and working for your food, like working in the fields where your food comes from, it will transform you. Men need to be hard workers. And when we're not, we will eat our own feet. Do you know what that means? That phrase, that expression, like, I chew my fingers off with frustration when I'm not working hard enough because I have like a nuclear reactor of energy that's being stuffed up and bottled up inside my body on a regular basis that if I don't vent that thing off, like if I don't like turn and burn, baby. Like crank on the nitric gas, and like just afterburners. Like I used to go to air shows a lot when I was a kid, and I would watch these fighter pilots climb into like an F-16 Falcon, and they would turn on and they'd do this thing called the 5-mile climb. They would take a fighter jet, and the F-16 was like almost like, I don't know, let me think of like a good analogy. It was a tiny, like a Mazda RX-7 or an RX-8, like a tiny little fast little sports car that would versus like the F-14 Tomcat, which was a beast of an airplane. Big hoss that could go fast, but was basically a massive interceptor. It was like a giant flying gas tank that could go a long ways and intercept people before they got there and shot your face off. The F-16 was built to be like scary fast and nimble, like a tiny little man full of all kinds of scary knives. The F-16 was glorious. And the first time I watched this thing do a 5-mile climb, the guy takes off and climbs almost instantly vertically. And then they have an afterburner where they're like double dipping on their fuel consumption. They're drinking out of all the hoses at the same time, and they're burning their own fuels, exhaust over and over. Like, this is so much intense heat and pressure that no man can truly comprehend it. We just make computer models that make people think that we're exquisitely capable of understanding the glorious power coming out of the back end of this thing. And it goes from 0 AGL, like above ground level, all the way up to 5 miles in altitude above ground level in seconds, like in front of your face. And the thunderous noise that comes off of this thing as it does, it just makes you want to scream with joy. Like that level to me of awesomeness is what I experienced today when I was making a fence. I was so happy because I got to like turn on the afterburners, baby. I've been cranking like 12, 14, 16, 18-hour days with just glee and anger and rage and insatiable frustration and bitterness of soul. It is so hard to farm, especially when you grew up as a softie, and I did. And I was in the United States military and carrying human beings around on my back and shooting and stabbing human beings, like wrestling for my life from childhood. But I was softie in so many areas once I went to school. The version of schooling that most humans have been pushing their children into is a place of murder. That's where you send your children to die. All the good in them that is designed by their creator to teach them about him and who he is, they have to go learn about liars, thieves, murderers. They go and become corrupted. They go and learn about the other gods, memorize their names, memorize the false histories and the false narratives. Like, you teach your children to memorize lies if you send them to school, and then you tell them, even if you know it's not true, that they have to do it anyways because that's what you got to do to pass the test. Like, do whatever it takes to get your children away from liars and murderers. Seriously. And do it now. Don't wait like tomorrow. Do it immediately. Make a serious decision to do whatever it takes to get your children out of a place where they are imprisoned to a system of lies. I would rather people become homeless migrant workers than spend one more day sending their children into those places of foolishness. And you know what? That's what it took. I couldn't afford to keep my family fed in those ways, so I became a volunteer on farms so that I could learn a skill, life skill, that would be profitable long-term for my family's daily bread. Let's just go here. Genesis 3. Check this out. I got totally schnockered in a place of Job, the book of Job. Y'all ever read the book of Job? I did a video in my Becoming a Gibberim series about the rolling artillery and talking about an assault from the enemy that is so strategic. It's just like nothing else you can even imagine. A rolling barrage in the United States military of artillery support was this idea that you could launch artillery and create a wall of shrapnel. Shrapnel is like high pieces, or like high velocity projectiles exploding into the air and destroying everything in their path, turning forests into giant splinter bombs in a matter of seconds. And then as this wall of lead and nightmares was coming forward out of like the trenches that the soldiers were in, they would create a wall of nightmares going forward. And then the troops basically would kind of creep up right behind that. And then that wall of death going towards the enemy would shield their guys and just rollingly barrage the enemy until our troops are basically cleared a path into the enemy's camp, okay? That's what happened to Job when Hasatan, the dragon, got the green light from Yahuwah to dive on in there and just go after Job and try to just eviscerate his life. Let's go to Job before we go to Genesis. There's a lot of speculation that Job was written before Genesis, or took place before Genesis, took place before the Torah was written by Moshe. Check this out. Let me tell you about a rolling barrage on Job. And then I'll get to the sweat of your face and manliness. Because you guys got to be men. Check this out. And Yahuwah said to Hasatan, see, this is Job chapter 1. See, all that he has is in your hand. Only do not lay a hand on himself. And Hasatan went out from the presence of Yahuwah. And the day came to be when his sons and daughters were eating and drinking wine in the house of their brother, the firstborn. By the way, this is one of the few biblical references that talk about birthdays. And it's not good. Consider it. Not a good thing. We've inherited a whole bunch of traditions that don't come from our Creator, that make us a whole bunch of self-worshiping idolaters. Just saying. And a messenger came to Job and said, the oxen were plowing and the donkeys feeding alongside them, when Sheba fell upon them and took them away, and they smote the servants with the edge of the sword, and I alone have escaped to inform you. And while he was still speaking, another also came and said, the fire of Elohim fell from the Shemaim and burned up the sheep and the servants and consumed them. And I alone have escaped to inform you. And while he was still speaking, another also came and said, the Kassanites formed 3 bands and made a raid on the camels and took them away, and they smote the servants with the edge of the sword, and I alone have escaped to inform you. And while he was still speaking, another also came and said, your sons and daughters were eating and drinking wine in their house of their brother, the firstborn. And see, a great wind came from the wilderness and struck the 4 corners of the house, and it fell on the young men, and they are dead. And I alone have escaped to inform you. And then Job rose up and tore his robe and shaved his head and fell to the ground and worshipped. And he said, naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I returned there. Yahuwah has given, and Yahuwah has taken away. Baruch, blessed be the name of Yahuwah. In all this, Job did not sin, nor ascribe wickedness to Yahuwah. That's a rolling barrage that Job just went through. And he literally sits there and works diligently to worship his master and his creator. Like, Job worked diligently with his hands. You know how I know this? Because Job's buddies show up after a little season of this. Hasatan is like, comes back to Yahuwah and is like, listen, this guy, he may not have cursed you yet, but let me tell you, flesh for flesh, eye for eye. If you let me smash his body into pieces, he's going to curse you to your face. And Yahuwah is like, everything is in his power except his life. You can't take his life. You can't kill him. Do whatever you want. So he does. And he strikes Job from head to toe with miserable, brutal sores and lesions that break out all over his body. Like, some of you right now have experienced just that. Some of you experienced the rolling barrage previously described, but some of you, and like, because of the Becoming a Linenite Facebook group, we hear testimonies and stories of people that are enduring incalculable suffering bodily. And some of you all are being smashed in and completely onslaughted. Like, there is a woman in particular, a young family that my wife and I have just a deep desire to try to bless and help and heal and help in any way that we can, because their skin is like genuinely falling off of their bodies and they are experiencing such suffering, and they have young children, and their husband is so sick and trying to recover from a massive illness as well. And like, they're experiencing so much suffering. There's so many people in the body who are experiencing extraordinary physical bodily suffering like never before. And you know what? These are strategies of this one. That's nothing new. But you know what? That does not make it any less painful when you're experiencing bodily suffering. And Job becomes literally unrecognizable to the friends and the family that were closest to him, to such an extent that when his 7 best buddies, for all intents and purposes, show up to see him, it says they could not recognize him. Like he was no longer the human they once knew him to be. Because of that, they had no place of reference for him. And it says they sat down with him. They tore their robes. I don't know how many of you guys have ever torn your clothing, like literally torn your clothing off of your body because you're in so much agony, internal agony. Try it. I encourage you. Like try biblical things in biblical ways. Like try to grieve the way you see people grieve in the scripture. Try to fast the way you see people fast in the scripture. Elisha runs 40 days. He runs walks. He journeys for 40 days and 40 nights through the wilderness of southern Israel and into Saudi Arabia with no food or water for 40 days and 40 nights. Doable. It's possible. An angel fed him living bread and manna and water from the heavens. And I think he cooked it under an acacia tree or a locust tree, which I plan to plant a lot of. Anyways, it said a broom tree, sorry. In my translation, it said a broom tree. Other translations say a juniper tree, which is like the ash juniper, which I'm a big fan of and I'm hiding numerous amounts of junipers in my life and I love it. Anyways, there's all kinds of possibilities to the human experience that most of us don't know because we don't take biblical things literally and try them ourselves. But some of you should consider maybe fasting on a scale that nobody else has talked to you about. I met a man who had fasted 40 days. I met him. He had fasted 40 days before he decided the woman that he wanted to marry was indeed the woman that was to be his. And likewise. But he fasted 40 days. And he talked about the transformation that had physically, but also spiritually. And he said there was like a food in his body that he could not articulate. Like there was a satisfaction of food when it came from this word. I've never eaten like that. I don't know what that feels like. Today I ate something out of the air and out of my soul and out of the strength of the Father that was satisfying beyond any meal I have ever tasted. And it was the sweat of my face going into the earth in such a way that my soul finally had that afterburner, like that just constant that's inside me all the time. Like people that actually spend time like with me longer term know that I have some serious like anger, like a deep level of other kind of anger that's still there. And if I don't work like that and I don't get it out like that, it gets out in all the wrong places. And that's a brutal, brutal challenge that I suffer with. And my family has to suffer with at times. And you know what? They lovingly help me through that in such unique ways. But this is the version of it that I'm supposed to experience. And Job is now experiencing torture and anguish and internal and physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, and psychological stress in such a unique way that he becomes unrecognizable to his friends. And they sit down and they start to hear his side of what's going on and they start giving counter advice. They start kind of telling him about the way that the world works, you know. But for 7 days, when they were grieving with him in the beginning, they tore their clothes, they poured ashes on their heads, and they sat down silent for 7 days. How many of you guys, if catastrophic, horrible things happened to somebody you loved or cared about, could leave your whatever you're doing and leave for 7 days? No questions asked. Just be gone for 7 days. And then you show up to be with your friend who maybe just had a miscarriage or maybe just lost one of the people in their life that was most important to them or lost everybody they ever knew because they started walking in a place of total uniqueness, pursuing a walk of life that involved the truth rather than lies. And they've lost everything they ever had for the sake of the truth. How many of you would go and sit with that person for 7 days without speaking? Have any of you ever done that? I've never gone 7 days without speaking. I've gone 24 hours without speaking because somebody bet me one time that I couldn't shut my mouth for a day. And I was like, watch me prove you wrong. Actually, I didn't say anything. I just stopped speaking and I spoke to them again the next day. Victory was sweet, but I didn't have a whole lot to say about it. Anyways, there is so much to be learned here from this story, but the part of it that I loved and I honed in on, I got totally infatuated with, was right here. You see this? This Eliphaz, chapter 4. It says, and Eliphaz, this is one of his Shalomi homies, buddy shows up. And he answered and said, If one tries a word with you, would you become impatient? But who is able to withhold himself from speaking? See, you, Job, have instructed many, and you have made weak hands strong. Your words have raised up him who was stumbling, and you have strengthened the weak. But now it has come to you, and you are impatient. It strikes you, and you are troubled. Is not your reverence your trust, the integrity of ways your expectancy? You get a character description of what Job's reputation is for the brethren and the people around him. It says that he instructs people, he's made weak hands strong, and he's used his words to raise up many who are weak and strengthen the weak knees. Do you know what that's called? That's like the exact idea that jumped out at me. An exhorter. Like, that's somebody who is an exhorter. Like in the New Testament, there's this Greek word, which is probably not the word that people used because they were Hebrew-speaking humans. Obviously, some of them spoke Greek as well. But I'll tell you right now, we've been deprived of the Hebrew Gospels. We've been deprived of the Hebrew New Testament for a reason, because those things were originally written in Hebrew. Absolutely. And believe me, there's a calculated effort to conceal such matters. But you know what's great? Yahuwah always preserves his word. Anyways, there's this word in Greek that's basically a parallel to what they're talking about here. And what it means, when you look it up in Hebrew, the Hebrew equivalent of what that word is kuf vav men. Kum or kum, right? And here's what it means. Okay, I got this red dictionary. Just let me show you. Hebrew Bible. Sorry. This is the Hallelujah Scriptures. That's a parallel Bible, meaning it has two versions of the Bible on the same page. One is English and one is Hebrew. Okay? If you want one that's leather like this, you gotta buy that. You can go to hallelujahscriptures.com or just check out the link below. I'm not affiliated with them all. I'm just a broski who found treasure, and I love to share it with people. Anyways, because in here, when I find a word like that, I track down, because I don't read Hebrew yet. I'm just on my way. You know what I mean? It's still a foreign tongue to me. So like when I saw verse 3, I'm like, what is that word? And so I go over into that portion on the Hebrew side, and I track down what that word is. Or I use an interlineary, which is like a study tool that helps me identify what words are being used. And then I track it down that way. But then I don't look at the Strong's Concordance, because just the Strong's Concordance, guys, is not the definition of words. Like, it's a tool that's used, but there's also other tools, which brings me to the Red Dictionary. The Etymological Dictionary of the Hebrew Language for English Readers, written by Ernest Klein. Ernest Klein. Stud. He's dead, but he's a stud because he crushed this book and made it digestible in beautiful pieces for me. And so you look up that word, right? Page 567. It says to rise, to exhort, to become powerful, to stand, to come on the scene, to maintain oneself, to help certainly and confirm others, was fixed, was preserved, was explained, ratified, kept and fulfilled, built up and carried out. That's what Job was. He was that guy. Like, his friends knew Job was that guy. That's what he did with his mouth, with his hands, with every fiber of his being and every area of his life. That's what Job was. Like, that's the definition of Job in the world's minds. It says he was the greatest man in all the East. Okay, timeline reference for perspective. It's not lying. He's the greatest, most influential and powerful man on the face of the earth when it comes to what I just described him as the most exhorting man on the face of the earth. The most maintaining of others and helping others, and certainly confirming and explaining things to others. He's the one that preserved the earth of the East. Like 5,000 sheep. When it describes what he had for like worldly visual references to wealth, okay? It says that he had 7 sons and 3 daughters. He was perfect and straight. He revered Elohim, and he turned aside from evil. And he had 7,000 sheep. 7,000 sheep! Like, how much pasture did Job have? I want to know. Like, I looked it up. I really did. I spent so much time trying to look at quality pastures and how much pasture is needed to sustain a flock of 7,000 sheep. And I'm not talking about when you look up stuff today and it says, well, you could have about 8,000 acres or 7,000 acres. I'm not talking about that. I want to know what kind of pasture is required to sustain 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 yoke of oxen, 500 female donkeys, and a very large body of servants. And this man was the greatest of all the people of the East. How do you sustain that? Question. By being the most exorbitant man on the earth. By being someone who rose up, worked hard every single day of his life for everybody he could. Because Job was the greatest servant of all the people of the East. You know how I know that? Because that's what we were made to be, men. We were made to be servants, bondsmen, slaves. Whatever word you want to put into that equation is what you were made to be. Someone who worked so ferociously hard that the only thing people had to say about you at the end of your life was that you labored and built up people, you edified people, you challenged and convicted, you served them, you took care of them, you sheltered them, you provided for them, you encouraged them, you kicked them straight in the teeth with reality when they needed it, but you loved them like nobody else on the face of the earth. Like, that's who Job was. There's this concept in Hebrew. Oh, here's another one. Check out this other study tool someone got me recently. Happy Sukkot. You know when we rain down gifts and blessings on our children like crazy? Not birthdays. Because it's not biblical. If anybody deserves a birthday blast, it's Yeshua, the king of creation. He deserves the birthday. And yet Yahuwah does not give us one day to celebrate, one verse telling us, and he was born on this day, so go celebrate it every year. He never says that. Not once, but he does give you at least 7 festivals that you're supposed to celebrate every single year, which are his set apart days that are amazing. And they're all about the mighty one. But this is one of the letters in Hebrew. It's called Zadi. Here's the modern Hebrew. It looks totally funky compared to other versions of the Hebrew here. It's just different. There's 2 versions of it. If the beginning of the word or in the word or at the end of the word, they use different versions. Anyways, the concept basically is like a hook. Or like kind of like a shepherd's staff, but more like I've got a hook in your jaw, son, and I'm gonna sink that thing and reel you in. Or like someone rising up. Remember that story in Moses and all of the people are griping and groaning and like, we want to make our own leader and we want to go back to Mitzrayim and we want to go have the leeks and the onions and we want someone to lead us because Moses, you're just in it for the prophets and the power. We want our own leaders. And Yahuwah is like, all right, I'll tell you what. You bring all them bad boys and those princes that think they're hot stuff in front of me. Have them all bring their staff. Because you're supposed to have a staff, men. Every one of you needs a staff. Biblical staffing. Check out my videos from before at the conference. You need a staff in your life. They're super biblical. He says, bring all your staffs, put them in this tent, mark them with your name so that everybody knows whose is who. Aaron leaves his staff in there, and he plants it in there. And you know what happens overnight? One night. All the other guys' staffs are still just staffs. But Aaron's went from being a stick to sprouting out a branch. Like, you see how it's sprouting out like a branch? It sprouts out a branch of an almond tree. So it goes from being a stick to an almond tree to sprouting out a branch to growing twigs to growing flowers to those flower-setting fruit of almonds, nuts, and producing clusters of ripe almonds. In a night. I want that kind of soil. Like, I want that so bad. And I'm literally on a quest, you guys, to grow an almond tree that goes from seed to fruit overnight. And I know it's possible because it's right there. Because Moses and Aaron and all those elders and all of the people of Israel knew it and had a witness to it because Yahuwah kept the Zadi, that's what that is, had the Zadi placed in the Ark of the Covenant, and it was supposed to be a witness to his people about the possibility of what this world can be like if we operate under the right authority, the right leadership. If we are governed by the one king that we are supposed to have over us, that is the fruitfulness of our lives. We will experience that kind of fruitfulness in our lives and in the earth if we're under that kind of authority, because he has the power to give us wisdom, knowledge, and understanding to such a scale that the forests and the farms and the swamps and the marshes and the inhospitable wastelands can become Edens, pastures of peace full of milk and honey. Because if you look at the Middle East today, and I am telling you, look at Israel, look at Jordan, look at Libya, look at Samaria, like look at these places in the East, look at Egypt, look at Iraq, and look at Saudi Arabia, look at Lebanon. Like go, I mean it, like you can do this from your house because most of you are sitting, remember? Stand up while you do it at least. Look at these places. So many of them have gone through that degradation that I talked to you about to where there's basically nothing left. Goats are the last step before the land turns into a desert, okay? I have lived most of my life in the deserts. I have lived other good giant portions of my life in the lush, ridiculous, moist, and succulent forests of the East. And you know what? I've realized there is no reason that we can't turn a desert back into that really fast, like beyond your wildest dreams quickly, because there's millions of people that have experienced this, and we have scriptural reference that tells us how it happens. And you know how it happens? Genesis 3, son. We go back to the one thing we are supposed to do, and it starts with men being a Zadi. Like Job was a Zadi, like a Zadi man, a righteous man, a man who was upright in all of his actions. They call it a Zadi man. Like Abraham was a Zadi man. It's this concept of steadfastness, like hardworking, relentlessly dedicated to a walk that could not be moved. They could not be moved. Like Noah, it says he was perfect and upright in all his generations. And I know there's lots of discussions like it was his genes. No, it was his choices, because based off of what you choose is what you get. Obedience. Like if there's one word that defines manhood, it's obedience. If there's one word that I had to choose to describe the scriptures, the culminating message of the scriptures, it's obedience. And until you get that through your head, like all of it's about that. If you ever have children, it's all about obedience, right? You have this lesson all day long if you have children. You're trying to teach them good and bad, right and wrong, left and right. Like those shoes don't go on that feet. That's not how you clean your butt. Like, this is not where you poop. Lots of good and bad, and like, you definitely eat with that finger. That's totally fine. Don't ever eat with that hand after you wiped your butt. Lots of lessons you have to teach them, and if you don't obey, we got serious problems, right? Like, don't turn, like I tell everybody, close the flap on the composting toilet, otherwise we get ridiculous stinky flies everywhere in our house that are covered in poop. Like, these are life lessons that you have to teach your children. Like, if you don't water this animal, it will die. Life lessons. Seriously important things, right? Don't shove those scissors in an outlet. I did that. I puked my face off. It was terrible. But I learned a valuable lesson. I didn't try it twice. Obedience. It's like the whole culmination of life. The scriptures are no different. And Yahweh created Adam, and I'm just going to go back and read you the story. Read you history, because this is history. Check it out. You ready? This is Bereshit. Genesis. I'm going to tell you how the world used to function. You ready for this? Day 6. Let's go back to day 6. So chapter 1. And Elohim, verse 26. And Elohim said, let us make man in our image, according to our likeness, and let them rule over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the Shemaim, and over the livestock, and over all the earth, and over all the creeping creatures that creep on the earth. And Elohim created the man in his image. In the image of Elohim he created him. Male and female he created them. And Elohim barak them, blessed them. And Elohim said to them, bear fruit. Just stop for a second. I know most of you jump ahead to the next thing that he said. Commandment number 1 of all commandments, like your number 1 primary directive as a human. Welcome, human. If you're a human, check this out. This is your one instruction of life. Be fruitful. Be fruitful. I told Chelsea this yesterday when I had this like, because if you do the Sabbath, it's a weapon and you get downloads of glory on that day. If you sit down on the Sabbath, I work like a crazy man 6 days out of the week. And then I sit down like a champion on Shabbat. And if you do, you can dive into this like no other time in your life. And it says this, be fruitful. And I always used to say, and multiply. And I told Chelsea, I said, Chelsea, what's the first commandment in the scriptures? And she goes, be fruitful and multiply. And I was like, and she was like, be fruitful and multiply? And I was like, be fruitful. Be fruitful. Be fruitful. Bear fruit. Your job, number one, all of your life is to bear fruit. If you don't know how fruit is born, you don't even know how to do that. So now I'm on a treasure hunt like never before in my life to find every verse that talks about soil, water, plants, trees, figs, vines, anything related to plants, food, and how it grows in the scriptures. Anytime anybody did anything with plants in any kind of food, I am on a quest like none other to find out all the treasures that's in here about that. Because I think everything we need to know in order to retrofy and fix the entire face of the earth in so many ways is because we got stopped here. We are not being fruitful, we are not multiplying, and we are not filling the earth. So that's the 3 commands at the beginning. Subdue it, number 4. Rule over the fish, number 5, of the sea, and over the birds of the Shemaim, number 6, and over all creatures moving on the earth, 7. 7 instructions. And to every beast of the earth, and to every bird of the Shemaim, and to every creeping creature on the earth, in which there is breath of life, every green plant is for food. And it came to be so. And Elohim saw all that he had made, and see, it was very good. And there came to be evening, and there came to be morning, 6th day. Thus the Shemaim and the earth were completed in all of their array. And on the 7th day, Elohim completed his work, which he had done, and he rested on the 7th day from all his work which he had made. And Elohim Barak, blessed, set it apart, the 7th day, and made it Kodesh, because on it he rested from all his work which Elohim in creating had made. These are the births of the Shemaim and the earth that were created in the day that Yahuwah Elohim made the earth and the Shemaim. Now no shrub of the field was yet on the earth, no plant of the field had yet sprung up, for Elohim had not sent rain on the earth, and there was no man to till, work the ground. But a mist went up from the earth and watered the entire surface of the ground. Pause. Did you ever think that there was a mist that came up out of the ground and watered the ground? Because all my life, every time I read that verse, I just did this backward engineering thing of dew coming down out of the sky and watering all the earth. But it says a mist came up out of the earth and watered the whole earth. There's this whole thing called like dew point and humidity, or if the humidity is not high enough, we don't get dew that settles on the ground, right? That's how we've engineered it to be. That's how we've kind of explained it away as. But this says a mist came up out of the ground, which is super strange. Until I listened to this LifeWeb seminar, I'm going to put a talk video in right here. Go to the video link below, Living Web. That's the name of it. And that's the snapshot from this series that I've listened to, which is one of the most incredibly knowledge-dense, beautifully articulated in so many ways. Some of it is totally not in line with what the scripture says, but I think some of you are mature enough humans to understand that I'm not advocating everything being said in this series. That was put on at this conference, like a 2-day conference of like just eating pure meat of glory when it comes to soil, nutrition, health, biodynamic farming, minerals, like just to me, what is the most insatiably lovely things I have heard in my life. One of the things that was packed in there was how the functions of the earth are. And he talked about in this presentation how just like the tides rise and fall, we get a high tide, we get a low tide, we get these high tides and these low tides in the seas. The same thing happens in the earth. Did you know that plants that are connected to the ground, like actual ground, not your potting trays, the actual soil that's touching the face of the earth, they get watered from beneath every single day. And then the earth comes up and waters it from underneath the ground, and you never see this happen. And it sinks back down. And you know what happens when it does that? As the water table rises, all the air is pumped out of the ground because there's lots of air. There should be lots of air in your soil. If you don't have air in your soil, it's an anaerobic place, a place where cancer grows, like in your dying cats and dogs. That's this giant exhale of the earth. And then as the water table drops again, It's a giant breathing in for all of the plants, because plants are so much more like people than I can even start to describe to you. It's unbelievable. Like, the only real difference between the blood in your body and the sap that's in a tree or the sap that's in a plant, you have a blood cell and a chloroform cell. They're almost the exact same in all that they do. There is a magnesium ion in the center of the chlorophyll cell, and there's an iron in our blood cells. Otherwise, they basically do all the same stuff in such an unbelievable way. It's staggering. There's so much interconnectedness with like plants, animals, people, because we were made at the same dang time almost. Plants and people, a little bit different, but animals and people made on the same day. So there's this water that happens every day from inside the earth that waters all the earth itself from underneath that we just don't even see, but it happens every day. And Yahoo has said so. I just happened to find a guy more recently and knowledgeable that talked about it also to confirm some of that. But check this out. Elohim formed the man out of dust from the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life. And the man became a living being. And Elohim planted a garden in Eden. Just check that out for a second. Think about how epic that is. This is not just like anywhere. He picked the choicest place on the face of perfection to put a garden. I want to see that so bad I can't even tell you. Like, I want to eat out of that garden more than anything ever because I just want to eat free food that I labored for, but I want to eat that food. I want food that comes out of the sky in such abundance, it's almost crushing my head to death. I walked under this tree in Florida that was growing a fruit that was so big, it would genuinely kill me if it landed on me. What was that thing called? It was full of spikes. I can't remember right now. Here's a picture of it. And they literally kill humans, just like coconuts, which are way deadlier than sharks and alligators combined. More people die from coconuts every day of their life, of your life, than ever died from a shark nibbling on their leg. So be excited if you get a bite from an alligator or a shark. Weep if you have to walk under a coconut tree, and tremble and beg the creator of all things to protect you from that thing because it's got fierce wrath in its husk. Anyways, there is this incredible garden Yahuwah makes, and he makes an incredibly unique thing to work in it. And you know what it is? Man. Men, you were made to work. You were made to work in a garden, like genuinely. Gardening was always my wife's thing. And I know so many of you watching this right now. I know there's a lot of ladies that watch this channel, but I know there's some men too. You were made to work in a garden, like it's biblical. First commandments, be fruitful. How do you be fruitful? Plant a garden, son, and you'll learn something about fruitfulness or your lack of being able to bear fruit. And you know what? Simultaneously, learn how to bear fruit in your own soul. That comes from this. Check this out. And out he put the man whom he had formed in the garden. So he creates man, not in the garden, outside the garden, just out there in the dust, in the red clay. And then he breathes into him. And he became a living soul. And out of the ground, Elohim made every tree grow that is pleasant to the sight and good for food, with the tree of Chai, life, in the midst of the garden, and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And a river went out from Eden to water the garden. And from there it divided and became 4 riverheads. Ready? He gives some instructions to the man. And Elohim took the man and put him in the garden to work it. Other translations might say, till it. That's not exactly what it says. That always kind of bothered me because I think there's this thing about tilling that we do, which is not the version of tilling that maybe is ideal. And it's just like this big question in like regenerative agriculture of whether or not you till or don't till. Or you got to till some, but how much is too much tillage? Tillage can be a total nightmare. In desert, make your land a desert super fast. Because it's like when you till the ground and you make the earth naked, the earth does not want to be naked, not even one little tiny, tiny bit. The earth really wants to cover herself because she's modest, like a woman should be. She covers herself with the grasses of the field, with trees if she can, because they're champions. But she'll cover herself. But when you rip that thing off and you till it and you just murder it and leave this dry, barren, blackish, brownish dirt sitting there, it just oxidizes away all that gigantic trillions of cells of living things that are under the earth that are working super hard and drinking that amazing hydraulically pumped water directly into their souls. when you do that, it's like shoving the ground through a hurricane and a tornado and a fire all at the same time, and it's just devastated. You lose 50% of your underground life, your rhizome, the place that gets all the nutrients. You lose 50% of it. You just murdered 50%. Trillions of things died under your care because you tilled too much. So don't do it much unless you absolutely have to. Even then, don't do it. I just did it recently. You can watch me here as I try to do it, and I just had no idea what I was doing because I'm using a walk-behind tractor that I've never used, but I've watched lots of videos on. It's so hard. Farming is so stinking hard. It's ridiculous. I'm so tired. It's unbelievable because I don't know what I'm doing. Like, I don't know. And it's really hard for me to be like, I don't know what I'm doing. Do you have confidence that I'm still going to be able to do my job? It's really hard, but I'm trying and I'm persevering because that's what farmers do. Check this out. He told him to work it and to guard it. And Elohim commanded the man, saying, eat of every tree of the garden. Every tree in the garden was edible. Oh, I dream of that. When I climbed a mulberry tree for the first time in, what was that, North Carolina. When I climbed a mulberry tree for the first time, I ate until I was on the edge of vomiting. It was so amazing. I had never had anything like that in my life. And I was scampering up the trees like a gypsy, finding the wind in her sails. It was so spectacular.
Hello. We're back in nature because, doggone it, didn't you know it? Nature's everywhere. Even in your eye. Ouch. You don't want nature in your eye too much. But when it suddenly comes across your path and you look, and sweet goodness, there's mulberries in your midst. Always have a container ready. That's why we recommend raw nuts, delicious seeds, portable goods. But it's customary to eat a fruit tree when you're gonna forage. It's important that you pick as high as you can possibly pick, but not much lower than that. Then the next person who may not be your height still has a chance at sweet goodness. And then it's literally scalably generous to everybody. But these are perfectly given for each and every person. Look at that. She even finds a way.
With a broken arm.
With a broken arm.
All right, Nene. You eating some berries?
Yeah.
Nice.
I ate and ate and ate. And then I discovered the grounders game. Because if you shake a mulberry tree, manna rains out of the sky. And so I was like, just eat it off the ground. And Naomi's like, I was like, this is the best day ever. She's like, this is the best day ever. And Chelsea's just watching us and filming, just like, this is the best day ever. I think I want to live here forever. Seriously, we wanted to live in the Appalachians forever. We loved it so much. Check this out. I was eating so much grounders game where you pick them all up off the ground that I chipped my tooth. See? Still there. That chip, because I ate a rock. Dadgummit. I chipped my tooth. It didn't hurt that bad, but I was really bummed. I ate way too many mulberries too fast because I just love free food. And I love food that is nutrient dense, full of life, and birds want to eat it just as much as I do. And so I have to fight them. And I love that feeling. It was so wonderful. And I was like, I want to eat food that grows out of trees. And this is when I got obsessed with perennials. Things that you plant once and you harvest off of indefinitely. Like, check this out. If you go watch my video called Calling All Cowards, if you watch that video, there's a tree behind me on stage. That tree is from this tree. That tree produces this nut. This is a hickory nut, okay? It's an incredibly hard nut. I'm not gonna be able to crack this with my teeth. I had to try. This is delicious on the inside, and I want to eat it so bad right now. I'm willing to get a hammer and crack my way through it. Question to any of you guys, if you know how to crack this easily without making lots of shards that go into the nut, please let me know. This tree, the reason I had that tree on stage was because I really wanted to tell people that I prayed diligently before that conference talk, and I was walking around in the forest because I like to do that. And I was looking for a tree to make a staff because I had this idea in my head that maybe I'll make a staff on stage and show people about what I did all summer.
Live dangerously. Swing machetes like this. This is like a $20 machete on Amazon. I have some really sweet machetes, but this is actually one of my favorites. Because it's super thin-edged and very easy to sharpen. Some kind of brush axe. Maybe I'll find a picture and roll it in. Put a link below. Anyways, invaluable tools in your life. This is staff life. You want to put something underneath the staff you're working on, so if you overswing, you don't hit a bunch of rocks with it, which I've done lots. And then it takes forever to resharpen. But be smarter than the wood and the rocks.
What I did all summer, which was make a whole lot of staffs because I was miserable and the jet engine in my soul was burning in all kinds of the wrong directions. And so I just took my machete and just smashed stuff. If I don't do that on a regular basis, man, I'm gonna smash something. It's crazy. I took my machete and was gonna make the staff on stage, right? I prayed diligently and asked the Father to help me find a tree to bring onto that stage. And I really believe he led me to that hickory tree. Don't tell the people that run the camp. I don't think it's like super approved, but I cut down that hickory tree. Okay. Hickory is what baseball bats are made out of, like real bats. I'm not talking about like the plastic metal garbage nightmare thing that they don't let you actually use because you'll kill humans if you hit them with that ball. Hickory bats, axe handles, like stuff that can take ferocious amounts of intense smashing power. And I want that in a staff because I really have a desire to just smash a wolf's head in. Not really, but kind of, you know what I mean? Go back to all of my desires to fight lions and fight wolves and bears because David did it. And I just want to be like David so bad. It's ridiculous. Best gift ever. Thank you to the person who sent me this stone. They sent me two. This is a stone from the Valley of Elah, where David fought Goliath. I feel so honored. It's my favorite rock. Legit. I found megalodon teeth. I found an iron axe head, Indian axe head. This is a stone from that same valley. I have 3 now. Giant slinging stones. 2 of them are from this. One of them is from a literal battle with a nightmare creature thing. Now I have 3. I need 2 more to get there, son. 2 more will get me to my giant slaying days. Anyways, I don't know if it was somebody at the conference or somebody that saw me at the conference, but they mailed me 2 beautiful Goliath slinging stones, and I was just like, this is the best day of my life. Check this out. I took that tree up onto stage, and when I cut it down, I brought it onto stage, and I had this huge giant top of it, and I was like, I'm going to show people how to make a staff. And then I was looking at that staff and the top of that tree when I cut it down, and the whole center of it was completely black. The whole entire core of it, like all the way straight down the middle, was black, like dead black. But the whole thing looked fine and healthy and vibrant. And I had this realization that that's what my soul looks like as I was staring into that thing. And I was like, yep, that's what the first third of my life looks like. That's it, full of death and that. Just so much horrible things. Like I stopped writing because I got tired of writing horrible stuff all the time. Like I have so much nightmares that I just never open the lid on. I just don't even want to deal with it. I don't want to touch that stuff with a 10-foot pole. And most humans don't either. But my life was full of death, blackness, and horrible stuff. And you know what I realized though? Is I was holding this hickory nut and I was looking around that forest and there's these mature hickory trees around it. Hickories are pretty unique because they don't bear fruit until they're in their 30th or 40th year of their life. There's not a lot of trees that are like that. Most of us are really impatient. And to imagine planting a tree that it's going to take 30 or 40 years before you can harvest the fruit for it just makes us kind of really not comfortable doing it. So most of us don't plant hickory trees. But a mighty man, Gibor from the north, sent me these. And I believe that's a lesson so many of us need to hear. That you might be 30, 40, 50 years into this thing, and you may not have borne very much fruit in your life. But that's no reason that any of it should be wasted. Because you know what? That hickory tree did? It grew 80 feet tall. And my friend had lived at this house for years. Never once noticed and regarded the fruit that was hanging off of this thing. Until one day he had eyes to see and ears to hear. And he looked out his window and saw fruitfulness and valued it and recognized it. And now I'm going to plant all of these and hope and pray in faith that I get to eat the fruit from it. And you know what? Yahuwah loves fruitful things. He loves them so much he made a garden full of trees that grow fruit, and all of it you can eat. I want to make such a place. I want people to realize that you can make a quarter acre, an eighth of an acre, the back patio of your studio apartment. You can be fruitful anywhere you are. You have no excuse. You don't have any excuse. If you are still alive, you have no excuse to not bear fruit on this earth. And I'm not just talking about plants and food. Do you understand what I'm saying? This is the same story that each and every one of us need in our life. Because you know what Adam got cursed with when he ate from the wrong tree in that garden? He said, and to the man, this is chapter 3, because you have listened to the voice of your wife and have eaten the tree which I commanded you, saying, do not eat it. Cursed is the ground because of you. The first thing that gets cursed because of man's mistake is the ground, which means the first thing that's going to be blessed if we turn back to obeying our Father's instructions is what? The ground. He literally promises us, if we turn back to him, I'm going to read you Deuteronomy. If we turn back to him, he'll bless the ground because it works in the inverse. If you can be cursed, like in the 10 Commandments, it says you can be cursed to the 3rd and 4th generation for breaking these. But a righteous man, for keeping those, will be blessed for 1,000 generations. Like, do you know why we get the opportunity to come back into the kingdom and have a relationship with Yahuwah, our creator? Is because there was a blessing for Abraham's righteousness thousands of years ago and generations and generations and generations ago. His zadiness, his righteousness, was so astoundingly marvelous that he found favor in Yahuwah's eyes, and he blessed him to thousands of generations. Like his choices, obedience, brought blessings that I am still eating the fruit of. Like, that's a serious tree to plant when you can feed the nations for centuries. Like millennia. You're feeding millennias of children because of your faithful tree that you planted. I want to plant trees like that, and I want to sow the seeds of it right into your soul, which is why sometimes I use my mouth to cut stinking deep furrows and till your heart. When Yahuwah told Adam to work the land, when he told him that, do you know what happened? He said this word, Obed. Ayin bet dalet. That word, Ayin bet dalet, it means to work, to serve, to obey, to worship, to till, to dress, to be a slave, to be a bondman, to work in action, to worship. Obed, like where we get the word Obadiah, the name. Obed, obedience. Obed. This is the first commandment, man. Your job, number 1, obey. Obey the voice of your master. Like, I am delighted to serve other people. I don't have my own farm. And you know what? I love it. I love that I get to be a servant in other people's houses. I love that I get to be a steward in other people's properties. I love being a servant in other people's places because I want to be found trustworthy. Like last year, I had the owner of one of the farms come into a greenhouse that he had not been in for 3 months. At the peak of 2 months. At the peak of the season, I had been managing not just that one, but almost half a dozen greenhouses and taking care of it completely to where my master did not have to step foot in there and he had total confidence in my work. And you know what happened after 2 months? He came in there and he literally said these words, well done, well done. And I was just like, I was so satisfied. But you know what? He didn't come in and say that on a regular basis. He said it then. And I was so satisfied to hear my master say, well done, good and faithful servant. I want to hear those words more than anything in my life. Like, I want to be like Eleazar in Abram's house. I want to be like Eleazar, who was entrusted with everything Abraham had. He said, I'm going to give to my servant Eleazar because I don't have a son. I want to be found so trustworthy that my master could send me out to find a wife for his only son who's supposed to be where the nations of the earth are going to flow out of. Like, talk about an amazing opportunity. Eleazar, man, getting the opportunity to pick Isaac's wife. Epic, incredible opportunity. And Yahweh totally answered him because he was faithful. He was an Obed. He was a Zadi man. And I love that. And you know what I discovered? The one thing that we can do to contend against the curse, the most powerful thing we can do is to obey and to work. Check this out. And Elohim, this is the curse, right? It said, cursed is the ground because of you. Verse 17, cursed is the ground because of you. In toil you are to eat of it all the days of your life. It shall bring forth thorns and thistles for you, and you shall eat the plants of the field. By the sweat of your face you are to eat bread until you return to the ground. For out of it you were taken, for dust you are, and to dust you return. After I went through this Living Web seminar discussion on what the plants really need to live, like I want healthy plants. You know what they need? Minerals, like salts, like things that occur in elements in nature that are not present in the soil can get unlocked by bacteria, fungi, and like all this activity that's in the soil can mine what's in the earth to give us great food coming out of it. And it's so deprived of it because we've depleted it from all these other practices and methodologies of farming that we've done over the years, that we've degraded it. But I realized that the one thing that we've degraded and deprived our soils from above all these other things that are lacking, like it's not because you don't have enough nitrogen in your soil. You know what you don't have enough of in your soil is the sweat of men's faces. Men can sweat 3 gallons of sweat every single day. Like I launched into a study all about human sweat because I realized if I'm trying to look at how to amend the soils of the farms that I'm working on to grow the most nutrient dense and rich food on the earth, I need moisture coming up from the ground to water my plants. First thing, I need water. Otherwise I can't do anything. If I can grow food on rocks. I can grow on rocks, but I have to have water to do that. If I can't get water to everything, it doesn't matter. But then if I can get water to everything, then I can give the supplementations into the soil of what it needs to get there. And I started wondering, what's in sweat? Because it's clear that man's sweat is supposed to be the fertilizer that the earth needs in order for the curse to turn off, right? This is some of the ingredients, the chemical compositions of human sweat. Check this out. Sodium, potassium, calcium, magnesium, zinc, copper, iron, chromium, nickel, lead, iodine, fluorine, glucose, nitrogen. You know what's in human sweat? What plants need. Men, you're literally supposed to go sweat your faces into the dirt. Like sweat your faces into the dirt. You can also cry into the dirt. I've done both. And I'm telling you right now, I sweat today so much. I was wearing linen. This is why I'm a ridiculous linenite, because I love it. But you know what? And I normally go jumping in creeks, but I don't always have creeks and flowing bodies of bountiful water around me. And so I use a garden hose a lot of times, just spray myself down. But today, in the last few days, I've not done it. I've just worked until I was pouring sweat, so much sweat that my linen itself was soaked from my sweat. And then I bent my face over as I was digging holes in the earth to try to drive fence posts in. And I was pouring sweat into the earth. And every drop that was falling off my face, I started thinking, Yahuwah, this can be my offering, my worship to you, so that this ground can be fertile and so it can be fruitful beyond wildest dreams. I believe that I can pray diligently and work and obey these instructions, and this land will be blessed. This land will be fruitful, because when you read the end of Deuteronomy, the last words of Moses, the faithful servant, when you read the last words of him who spoke face to face to Yahuwah, who Yahuwah knew face to face, was in such an intimate relationship, it was like they sat down and hung out and chatted every day. Like, that's Moses. These are the last words he gives to his people when he's face to face with them. This is what he says. This is chapter 30. He just went through a lot of the blessings and the curses. This is what happens if you obey. This is what happens if you don't obey. And it shall be, when all of these words come upon you, the barakah, the blessings, and the curse, and the curse, which I have put before you, and you shall bring them back to your heart among all the Gentiles where Yahuwah your Elohim drives you. And you shall turn back to Yahuwah your Elohim and obey his voice, according to all that I command you today, with all your heart and with all your being, you and your children. Then Yahuwah your Elohim shall have compassion on you, and shall turn back your captivity, and turn back and gather you from all the peoples where Yahuwah your Elohim has scattered you. And if any of you are driven out to the farthest parts under the Shemayim, from there Yahuwah your Elohim gathers you, and from there he takes you. And Yahuwah shall bring you to the land which your fathers possessed, and you shall possess it. And he shall do good to you and increase you more than your fathers. And Yahuwah your Elohim shall circumcise your heart and the heart of your seed, to love Yahuwah your Elohim with all your heart and with all your being, so that you might live. And Yahuwah your Elohim shall put all these curses on your enemies and on those who hate you, who persecuted you. And you shall turn back and obey the voice of Yahuwah and do all his commands, which I command you today. You ready? And Yahuwah your Elohim shall make you have excess in all the work of your hand, in the fruit of your body, in the fruit of your livestock, and the fruit of your ground for good. For Yahuwah turns back to rejoice over you for good, as he rejoiced over your fathers, if you, Obed, work, guard, diligently worship, sweat, anguish, and toil, persevere, don't relent, never give up, never stop pursuing good, righteous things. Never cease in doing what is good. Never quit. Honor him, cherish him, trust him. Flee from your former ways of doing things. Love and cherish him. If you obey the voice of Yahuwah your Elohim, to guard his commands and his laws, which are written in this book of the Torah, if you turn back to Yahuwah your Elohim with all your heart and with all your being, for this command which I am commanding you today is not too hard for you, nor is it far off. These commandments are not hard. He would have told us right here if they were hard. He says it's not. Circumcising your heart, impossible. Circumcising the innermost being of yourself, impossible. You need a supernatural encounter, a radically intelligent, supernaturally loving, impossibly dedicated Obed. You need an obedient servant who can help you to do that. And we have one, and it's our Messiah, who showed us how to work hard and did everything that was pleasing in his Father's sight. And you know what? There was not just Yeshua as the only example of that. We've had Zadi men from Genesis to Revelation to show us that any of us can do it, that all of you can be an Obed man. You can be an Obadiah. You can be an obedient servant. You are more than ready for it. You takes discipline. It's going to take the sweat of your face. It's going to be rising up early. I challenge every single one of you. Get up 1 hour earlier every single day than you have to. Never wake up when you have to go. Wake up 1 hour earlier than you have to so that you can establish discipline in your life. Of all the things that the military taught me, the one that was the most valuable, the most fruitful, it was discipline. And men, softies, lack discipline. And that's why you take a civilian and you beat him into a stinking bloody pulp through discipline. You discipline him because Yahweh disciplines those he loves. And Yahweh loves to turn boys into men and men into soldiers. And that's what it takes to do that. There was this thing in the military that they did intentionally to just deprive you of sleep on an ongoing, regular basis, and then demand you to get up and perform exquisitely at a moment's notice. And you know what that's called? Discipline. It's so critical that you learn discipline. And you know how you do that? Exercise discipline in your life by getting up 1 hour early every day. And you know what? I give that challenge to people, and I find out real quick who's actually going to be a disciplined man. I don't trust people that aren't willing to sacrifice everything that's in them and be uncomfortable for the sake of what's most important to them, because you're going to do it. If sleep is your idol, murder it. I'm serious. You don't need anything like the amount of sleep that you think you do. Yahuwah will give you strength more than anything you ever thought possible if you're sacrificing and worshiping and obeying him. He'll give you something that you can't get by eating. If fasting is what you need to do, fast a meal every single day. Don't eat before noon every single day. See how that changes you. Sacrifice one meal every single day to him and actually turn to this bread of life instead. Watch what that does to you. Don't drink water for 10 hours out of the day. You can do it. You can work all day long off the sweat of your face. My friend who was a missionary in Africa, he said he could not believe how much water we drank because he was over there, I think, 5 years. And he came back over here and he had acclimatized. He'd acclimated himself to Kenyans. You know, the dudes that run the ultra marathons faster than everybody on the face of the earth ever even hoped to dream to. Kenyans, man. Savage runners. Run from a lion. I want to run from a lion so bad. I want to run into a lion so bad. They ran from lions. That's always my, Maasai, I want to be like you, jump so high, throw spears at lions, protect my flock. I have a Maasai spear that's less than 10 feet from my face right now. I'm not kidding. I can see it out the window. I love that feeling. I keep it in front of my house, my RV, and it makes people super excited or really uncomfortable. They're like, why do you have a spear right outside your door? I'm like, you don't? What do you live in? An apartment? So why don't you have a spear? They make small spears. Check it out. Have a spear outside your door to make people super curious. Anyways, Kenyans. He was serious. He told me, those guys, because I drink like this, like Camel. Let me just put it this way. I can drink 4 gallons of water. When I was in the United States military at Fort Knox, Kentucky, in the middle of the sickeningly hot Kentucky summer, you Kentuckians know what I'm talking about. It's ridiculous. Savages. I love it. I'm not joking. I would drink 4 gallons of water a day, and I'd pee less than 4 times. 4 gallons would get converted into the sweat of my face and disappear right back into the earth. And it wouldn't come out pee. It was impossible to get my head around that I could drink 4 gallons of water and not pee much. Blew my mind. Today, I drank 2.5 gallons of water and I peed 3 times. The rest of it was fertilizer for the earth, baby. I can't wait to see what kind of delicious nut trees grow out of it. I'm not kidding. I'm super devoted to trying to sweat my face all over all this land as much as I can because I want to eat the fruitfulness thereof. And I know that Yahuwah will hearken unto my cry when I cry out for him. I want springs of living water bursting forth out of all of this land. And I want lush pastures for all of these sheep and all of these turkeys and all of these cattle and all of these pigs to just grow abundantly. I want that so bad in my soul. And he promises me, if I do this, he will do that. And I believe it. Check this out. See, I have it says verse 13 or verse 12, sorry. It is not in the Shemayim to say, who shall ascend into the Shemayim? That's heavens. For us to bring it to us or cause us to hear it so that we do it. Nor is it beyond the sea to say, who shall go over the sea for us and bring it to us and cause us to hear it so that we do it? For the word is very near you, in your mouth and in your heart, to do it. Obey. See, I have put before you today high and good, life and good, death and evil, in that I am commanding you today to love Yahuwah your Elohim, to walk in his ways, to guard his commands and his laws and his right rulings, Zadikah. And you shall live and increase, be fruitful. And Yahuwah your Elohim shall barak and bless you in the land which you go to possess. He is so good. I am so satisfied that I worked so hard today. I've been up since 5 a.m. 5 a.m. It is now 10:50. It's a long day. And I hauled bags of concrete. And I drilled post holes. And I worked all day long. I chased sheep. I chased a mean, nasty donkey. I got bit by bugs. I'm bleeding. I've got wounds from being a man. I'm so happy. I watch guys ripping on chainsaws and cutting cedar logs and driving fence posts with a machine gun fence post driver into bare rock and just watching it get so hot that it melted my glove. It was amazing. Like, it was so satisfying. And you know when that part of my soul got locked up and was sequestered away by this one? When I was 9 years old, and I talk about this in my book, in one of the worst chapters for some people, in one of the hardest portions of the times in my life. Chapter 26, it's called The Dodge Viper. Start it, if you're gonna just skip ahead and not read any of my life story in the proper order that I wrote it in, just jump on ahead to page 181 in part 6. So you're a sixth of the way through my soul as you're on that part. Halfway into the center of my soul, that black abyss, this is where that black abyss in my soul atrophied and died in. At that same time in my life, when I was playing the violin and getting up at 4:30 in the morning to go be in the high school orchestra, to try to be in the high school orchestra, I had to take the high school bus way earlier when I was in 4th grade. And I was like, I gotta go to school. So I got on the bus every morning and my family just loaded me on there and shipped me off to the school of nightmares. When I got on the bus, I met a 13-year-old girl that showed me authority. Lamed, the Zadi. She was a Zadi woman. She had authority and wasn't afraid of demons and demon-possessed kids. She was amazing. When that whole situation was happening in my life, I lived right next to a huge Indian reservation, a Navajo reservation. This is in a town called Pinetop, Sholo, Lakeside. It's like 3 towns stuffed into one box that nobody knows what to call it, so they just call it all of it. I was in one of these little villages, and across the street from me was this big pasture, I don't know what to call it, a fenced-in property. And there were cowboys, legitimate cowboys. At this school, it was one of the biggest schools in the area because all the children went there. They bussed in all these kids from the Navajo reservation, and it was literally cowboys and Indians. We used to laugh and say that all the time because at the talent show, there'd be like cowboys wrestling little calves, and then there'd be Indians doing like, you know, the dance, like the eagle dance and stuff, you know, eagle feathers. It was literally cowboys and Indians at that school, and they had like one of the highest state records for football victories, whatever. They wrestled a pigskin and thought they were glorious. It was nuts. But I saw these cowboys that were across the highway or across the road all the time, driving fence posts and pulling strands of barbed wire. You know, they use this tensioner thing. And they were out there driving these T-posts. Bam, 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 bam. And I remember it was smoking hot, ridiculous, melt your face off, like Arizona desert, high mountain desert sun hot. And they were out there just pouring sweat. Cowboys, like real cowboys, working like men. And I looked at that and I remember at this time in my life when I was so embittered and I saw these guys out there doing that. And I remember making what's called a rash vow, which talks about in the Torah. Don't do them. I made a rash vow and I looked at that situation and I said, I never want to do that. I never want to have to make fences like that. To me, it looked appalling. It looked miserable. I didn't want anything to do with it. And the reality was that was a reflection of my inner feeling of my soul. But you know why I didn't ever want to do that? Because I never had goats. I never had cattle. I never had sheep. I never had livestock. All I ate was meat that came in a bag or came out of a box at a store. I had no skin in the game. But you know when that all changed for me? When I started working with goats and I started learning these horribly ridiculous lessons about the 2 things I told those children at that conference, which was that goats pee on their faces. Put that in your YouTube videos if you have goats. Put that in all of your YouTube videos. If you have goats, stop showing me the cute ones that are snuggly. Show me the ones that covered their entire body with pee. Goats pee on themselves, all over themselves. From their legs, their front legs, to their entire chest, to their little beards, completely covered in the most putrid, foul, stench urine you've ever smelled in your life. And it's musky. And they rub it on you. And they rub it on the other goats. And they like mark everything with it. Oh my gosh, I don't like goats. I don't. I love the milk that I got out of goats. There's beautiful videos of Naomi and I like milking goats together and it's like, oh, it's so cute. What you didn't know is I was standing in a ridiculous, nasty stall full of pee and poop that was so saturated with it, it was disgusting and I wouldn't even barefoot in there and I'm a relentless barefooter. I don't like goats at all and I don't want them in the kingdom. I hope they're not there because Yahuwah said he's going to separate the sheep from the goats. Because he doesn't want goats in his kingdom. Because goats want to get out of fences. That's the other lesson I told him. That goats want to get out. They want to get out and they want to eat your fruit trees and your nut trees and you want to break their necks. And it's so hard to break a goat's neck. I've tried. Let me tell you, I've tried. There was a goat on that farm that would pee on his face. And I would lead him out on like a collar, like a dog collar, with this thing called a lead, which was just a dog leash that was made out of metal. They call like, when you cable a dog and you feed it horrible nightmare foods, and then you cable it with like a big long metalish cable. We used to do that with our goats, and we would tie them into this Appalachian forest because everything there is growing, mostly with stuff that tells you it's in a hurting state. Lots of poison ivy, lots of thorns and thistles, and it's trying to tell you to back off. I used to lead my goats into that forest and tie them up and let them eat. Like, eat these trees, eat the poison ivy. Well, I tied this goat up in there, and I was leading him back in. And he was yellow. He was white, goat, completely yellow from like here all the way down to his backside, yellow with pee. And I lead him all the way back into the stall, into the yard. And right when I open the gate, he's all like, yeah, I'll go in. I go in the gate. He comes in the gate. I take the collar. I take the thing off his collar. And the second I take it off his collar and close the gate, he rubs that nasty, stinky, filthy, urine-covered thing all over me, and I was so pissed. I was so mad at him. I flipped him on his back, right? Because if a goat touches you with its horns, it meant to. Anytime, no matter what. And you put that thing on its back. And so that's what I did. I wrestled him right onto his back. I flipped him over, and goats sit there. It's like one of the only positions you can control a goat from. You put them completely on their back, and then you shove your front legs right up under their armpits, and then you stare them right in the face, and you talk to them about how you're feeling. And you know what? When I talked to him that time, I'm telling you right now, I was a steward on that farm, but I tell you, I did this to him. I pulled my knife out and I put it up next to his throat, and I put it next to his pulsing throat, and I was like, I could take your life. I told him that. It's one of the only things I've ever threatened. Like, I've never threatened an animal like that, but I threatened him so viscerally. And you know what happened? He just stared at me because, gosh dang it, goats have the creepiest eyes I've ever seen, and they seem demon-possessed. It's biblical that animals can be demon-possessed. I know pigs can. Read the scriptures. That goat looked demon-possessed, and I'm telling you, I was staring that thing in the eyes, and I was just staring at its throbbing neck, and I was like, I could gut you right now. I was so mad. But you know why I didn't? Because that wasn't my animal to cull from the herd. But any other time of the week, I'd cull that stinking animal from the herd. I don't want it reproducing ever anywhere near any of us. Needless to say, I left those teenagers and the young children in there with two very visceral lessons about what goats do and why I want sheep. And all those children, you know what they ran home and they told their parents what we learned with Nature Nate at his teenage talk? Goats pee on their faces! Some of them got the takeaway from the lesson, which was this: be a sheep, not a goat. Don't spend your whole life trying to get out of fences. Which is why I had finally developed an appreciation for wanting to build fences. When I was on that farm, I learned I want to build fences more than anything ever, because for 5 months, there was not one day, not a Sabbath, not a feast day, not any day of that entire time I was there, that a goat did not get out of the fence. Every day of my life while I was there, the goats got out of the fences. And all I wanted was a fence that things would stay inside of or outside of. I wanted peace of mind. And so when I finally got a chance to build a fence, I was like, you betcha, son. I couldn't be happier to slam this thing down into the ground 450 times because I want fences. And you know what? I did that today because I want my chickens. I want the chickens to be secure in their pasture. I want the guard dogs to be able to guard the sheep. I want the sheep to be able to be in good pastures. I want to make fences so bad. I literally stay up till 2 a.m. staring at fence making videos and researching high tensile electric fencing. And I'm looking into all of it because I want to do like mob grazing style, like Greg Judy of Regenerative, amazing pasture man. I want to be like Greg Judy. But I just want to be like Jacob, because it said that everybody, if you read the book of Jasher, I highly encourage it. If you read the book of Jasher, it said everybody on the earth wanted to buy Jacob's cows. Like, I want that. I desire to be like my father, Yaakov, Jacob. I want to be like that, where my sheep are so awesome and numerous that people from all over the world are like, I flew all the way here to get your sheep. I'll be like, I've never been more happy to hear those words in my entire life. I want cows that are so overwhelmingly healthy and vibrant and full of glory that everybody wants those cows. I want nut trees that go from this to bearing a hickory nut in a day. I want that, and I believe Yahuwah will do it because he's done it before and he can do it again. Because if we turn back to him, he will give us the gardens full of life again. We just need to get there, y'all. And I believe we can all get there together. I'm taking you on that journey as I persevere into this ridiculously exciting time of my life. And I hope each and every one of you will consider strongly establishing a real discipline in your life. 1 hour early. Read this, eat it and drink it and pray. Intercede. Bless your enemies and stop talking bad about leadership. I don't care how bad you think the bad guys are out there, y'all. They're not the bad guy. Bless your enemies. Rise up early and bless those who are persecuting you. Bless them and bless the one who made the heavens above, the earth beneath, and all that's in it. Because by doing so, he'll give you everything you need for a life more glorious than anything you could have imagined. I may not have been bearing the fruit I was hoping for in those years of my life when my soul was locked up in that. But those cowboys were teaching me a lesson that I wouldn't get to eat the fruit of for 25 years. And you know what I saw then? Those guys out there were working that hard because they had a better why. They had a better reason in their soul than I did. They had a why that was so big. They were willing to go out there and labor all day long and let the sweat of their face fertilize the ground because they were building up fences and creating peace of mind. They were going to be fruitful and they were going to multiply. And I want that so bad. And I want that for each of your lives. I want you to realize that the best, most satisfying work of your life is not in the soft fields of civilization. It is in the hard, rugged deserts and brutal landscapes where you can labor and rest in satisfaction, because I want you to eat your bread in satisfaction. And if you labor for it in this way, with this body, he will strengthen you. I know some of you guys think you're physically unable to do that kind of work, but let me tell you, get in line, because there's people that I have seen who are 75 years old laboring on farms with me, planting every single seed that was planted for 5 months on a farm. People that were retired for a decade planted tens of thousands of plants that fed thousands and thousands and thousands of people. How many people are going to eat off of a tree? Remember we talked about that? A man who was well into his youth planted trees with his fingers. And people are eating of them every day of their life. There's a chestnut tree that's over in Europe that's been growing and producing chestnuts for 4,000 years. Sorry, for a couple thousand years. It grows basically on rock. Nobody fertilizes it. It just creates life over and over and over again. I want to be like that. I want you guys to be like that. Plant trees. Change the world. Guard and obey and worship and work hard. And by doing so, we can become mighty again. I love you all. I look forward to talking to you all soon.